stuff as a toolkit to help companies improve. And lately, for the past few years, I've been working with a really interesting company, Spotify. In the past, I've also worked with Skype and some bigger government organizations. And I'm very interested in the practical side. How do you get stuff to actually work in practice? So, what is culture then? This is the best definition I've heard. Stuff that people do without noticing it, right? You don't really notice culture. It's like a fish swimming inside a tank of water won't notice the water, right? Because it's swimming inside it. What I find interesting as a consultant, how many of you here are consultants? And how many of you do agile type consulting, or how many of you help companies change? Yeah, so you've seen this too. You come in as an outsider, you have these fresh eyes, you see things that people don't often notice. It's very interesting. So culture is stuff that people do without noticing it. And what I've noticed is, this is a crazy generalization, which is after all these years of helping companies, it seems like companies with that agile culture seem to build better stuff. It seems so. What do you think? Familiar? Nah, they're looking at me saying, throw them out of here, we don't agree with them. Well, Spotify's not here yet, right? It depends. That's the consulting term. Yeah, well, this one I actually have data on. Happier employees. I'll show you that in a moment. But what I find is that agile companies that really get an agile culture seem to build better products, and they seem to have happier employees. And to me, that equates to a better world. I said it was a wild generalization, right? So agile culture equals better world. You buy that? Yeah, good, they buy that. The problem is agile is fragile. I'll give an example of that. If you look at, I was involved in an organization that managed to burn 1 billion euros. How much is that in baht? Times 40. So 40 billion baht, 40,000 million baht, 40,000 baht, that's a lot of money, yeah. So how the heck do you burn 40,000 baht? This was the Swedish police organization. I worked for them for a while. And what we were going to build was a system that makes life easier for police by giving the police laptops so that they can do, lots of investigation, administration in the field without going back to the station. Great. We used, the project was called Pust. It was based on Java technology. And it was a huge success by pretty much any measure. I asked people who participated, and they told me this was probably the most interesting and successful project I've seen in my whole career. And I asked customers, and they're like, wow, I've never seen company deliver something so useful in such a short time. And I think the reason why this project was a success was because we were allowed to break all the rules. This was a government organization, they're not normally agile. But this project was very urgent and we were allowed to break all the rules, and we applied all these lean and agile things, and it worked really well. I'm not going to give you details about that. And I promise I'm not here to pitch a book. But I want to just mention, this book is, if you want details about this case study, it's in that book. Here's an example of media coverage, very much positive media coverage. You say, wow, the police can work more effectively now and everything's great. But wait, I told you this was going to be a failure story, right? So what you don't see in the book is what happened afterwards. So one of the most successful projects I've ever seen was followed by one of the least successful projects I've ever seen, or even heard of. So here's what happened. This was rolled out. Media success, happy users, happy team. It even won a prize, Project of the Year. It was finalist in a kind of awards. But then afterwards, something happened. A decision was made, very high up in the organization, the Swedish government police organization. They decided to rebuild it from scratch using Siebel. Anybody know about Siebel? No. Why would they rebuild it using Siebel? Well, because there was a decision at a high level to standardize all our systems. Like, we have all these different customized systems, and it's expensive. We want to have a standardized platform for everything. So a consultant came in, who happened to be from Oracle, who happens to sell Siebel. And this consultant made a big pre-study, and the conclusion of the pre-study was, I think you should use Siebel for everything in the Swedish police. And the management is like, you might not believe me, but it's incredible. I've been doing some research. I have the original formal documents where the author is an Oracle employee signing off on this pre-study recommending Siebel. Later on, they changed the name of the author. They changed the name to hide the fact. So yeah, there is some corruption in Sweden too sometimes. Yeah. And not only did they make this decision about using a technology that the development team said was wrong. The development team said this will not be suitable because this is a UX critical system. It is used in the field by real policemen while they are talking to criminals, interrogating them. So it must be very easy to use, right? But no, they didn't listen. The decision was made anyway. Use Siebel. And not only that, the decision was made to use a waterfall method, Big Bang. Traditional, right? So it's okay to make a bad decision if you roll it out iteratively, because then you'll discover that it was a bad decision and you can change it, right? But this was a bad decision that was rolled out using Big Bang, which means that we delayed the feedback by several years. So what happened was it was rolled out several years later, and it was a disaster. So now every day in every major Swedish newspaper, you can read about the policemen screaming and crying about this stupid system that's been released that is pretty much unusable. It's slow and clumsy, and they hate it. And especially they're angry because before they got a system that was good, right? And it was taken away and they were given a system that was bad. It's a huge disaster, and it could have been avoided because the team wrote a document, a formal document, which they sent to the top level management, signed by the project manager and everything, where they said, we don't think this will succeed, we think this will fail. Here's all the reasons why. So why? How could this happen? Any thoughts? Corruption? A little bit, partly maybe, but the corruption would explain why they chose Siebel based on a recommendation from Oracle, but it would not explain why they would roll it out using Big Bang instead of iteratively. So why? It's culture. Culture is my only explanation. I think what happened, I'm still doing a little bit of an examination of this. This was an internal police report that calculated that the cost to Swedish society is about 1 billion euros in terms of the police can't work effectively. And if you also add all the development costs and things like that. So an absolute disaster. I think what happened was, yeah, maybe that's my next book, right? How to Burn 1 billion euros. I think what happened was this. There's a little cute agile fish swimming, you know. Big government organization, and a small agile fish. It was an exception, this one project, right? And I thought that, oh, it was a successful project. So now Agile is going to spread. That was my experience in the past. So I thought, this is great. They've seen success. It's going to stick. But it turned out that, this was a temporary thing inside an overall culture which was very much not Agile. So I think this is what happened, right? Culture eats process for breakfast. I don't know whose quote I stole that from, but... So the default culture in this organization was different. And unless somebody's putting energy into maintaining this Agile mindset, it's going to disappear. So the mistake we made here was that Agile was local to one project. It wasn't anchored high up in the organization, so it disappeared. So that was a big learning for me. Wow, that's very interesting. Right, that was the failure story. You want to hear the success story as well? Okay, I thought I'd start with the failure story. I'll put you down here, right? Revolutionizing the music industry. Spotify is really revolutionizing the music industry, and I'm really happy to be part of this because it's so interesting to see up close how that looks like. Now, once upon a time, the music industry was broken in the sense that in Sweden, you know, people would want to listen to music, they would go to Pirate Bay and download a copy, right? And all the labels were very angry, musicians were very, very angry, and you know, people were trying to fight pirate copying. But then these guys, Spotify founders, were like studying at the World Institute of Technology in Stockholm. This was 2006. Like, there must be a better way. What if we build a product that makes pirate copying obsolete? So instead of trying to fight pirate copy, we just provide a better option for people. You know, maybe people don't want to pirate copy. Maybe they just want to listen to music. Right? Turned out they were right. So it ended up being this product. I don't know how many of you here have used Spotify product. It's not formally rolled out in Thailand yet, but some of you have tunnels or whatever used to access it. We're rolling this out in one country at a time because there's a lot of legal issues to sort out in every country, right? So it's going to come to Thailand. But a good summary is it's like a magical music player, like iTunes, in which you've bought every song in the world. Kind of like Google for music. You just type the name of a song and it plays. Right? And then you can organize your music using playlists and things like that. If you're a paying subscriber, you can play music in your mobile phone. You can download it, run it offline. But it's basically just a streaming music player, but it's very well done. It works very nicely. And it's legal, so it's freemium, so some users pay, some don't. And the users that pay get some extra stuff. And then money passes back to the musicians. Of course, the music labels take a big part of that pie, but the basic idea is we want to do this clean. We want people to earn money from the music. Right, so a bit of data, about 20 million tracks are inside this system now, and about 20,000 are added every day. It's a big music database. And the growth has been like this in terms of users, free users, this is paying users. It's pretty much a success story in terms of changing in music and industry. Right, in practice now we are spread across 4 countries. We have offices in about I think 30 countries, but the development centers are in 4 countries, right? Mostly Stockholm, some teams in Gothenburg, a bunch of teams in New York, and some in San Francisco. And the staff size has literally doubled every year, which creates a kind of crazy dynamic. This is our biggest challenge. It's been doubling every year since 2006. But what's interesting is despite this very fast growth, Spotify has managed to pretty much come at the top of most studies about happy employees. So growth pain hurts. Has anybody worked at a company with kind of hyper growth like this, doubling every year? Kind of. Nobody. Where are your .coms? There's be some .coms in there. Okay. I think some of these LaunchPad guys are going to be. If I ask the same question in 1 year, you'll be like that. I don't know. Used to be, right? Yeah, it hurts, right? But what's cool is, Spotify and a lot of other kind of agile companies managed to stay at the top of most studies. This is from Glassdoor.com. There's other studies. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening there. Right? You can't really compare companies. You can't copy-paste from different. Every company has their own circumstance. Spotify kind of cheated because they were born agile. The people who created the company had an agile mindset. So agile is inside the DNA of the company. We didn't go through a change. Right? We're more like we're going through constant change. But there was no agile transitioning project. So 2006, this agile company was born, grew up to form an agile culture. And initially we were doing Scrum pretty much by the book, right? How many of you know Scrum pretty much? That's the majority. For those who don't, you'll catch the most important stuff. And what we noticed was we were following this process framework pretty much by the book, which worked quite well to a certain limit. After a while we were maybe 15, 20 teams. Now we have about 50 teams, but back then, 2008 or 9, we had maybe, this was 2010 I think, we had maybe 15 teams. All these, doing Scrum by the book, we felt it was slowing us down a little bit. So we pretty much decided to screw the rules. This is actually a quote from one of the HR managers. He said, screw the rules. The rules are a good start, then break them when needed. You don't often hear an HR manager say that kind of thing. So I talked about this in my training course today. This is a useful model when looking at how we learn. It's from Japan, Shuhari. When you're at Shu, you're learning something new, then it's pretty much follow the rules, right? Do what the teacher says. Shut up, don't ask questions, just execute, right? And then once you've learned how to, cook this meal or ski down the ski slope, once you can do that by following the instructions, then you can start adapting and experimenting and finding your own way, right? And At re-level, you don't worry about rules, you just do. So if you're gonna, probably most of you who ride bicycle, you're a re-level bicyclist, right? You don't worry about how am I gonna ride this bicycle today, right? You just get on and you go away. So it turns out that a lot of companies are stuck here in shoe because they follow some book, which is a good start, but then they're stuck with that. So they just follow Scrum by the book, or they follow XP by the book, or whatever by the book, and they're stuck there. So I call that Scrum bugophobia. You're afraid of doing Scrum wrong, so you follow the book. Symptoms, stuck in shoe. So Spotify was kind of stuck here for a while until we realized it, and we're like, we gotta get unstuck. So we told all these teams, you don't have to do Scrum. We want you to be agile. We want you to deliver often and continuously improve your process. But we don't prescribe any specific toolkit, right? So choose your own way of working. Agile is more important than Scrum. So we renamed the Scrum Master role. We had a bunch of Scrum Masters, so we renamed them and said, how about we just call it Agile Coaches then, right? So they're no longer the master of anything, they're more coaches, servants. And principles matter more than practices. So we identified some things that we care a lot about. Courage, about responding to change, this was kind of like our version of the Agile Manifesto. Transparency, customer collaboration, deliver often, and inspect and adapt. These were the things that the coaches were emphasizing, right? And they said, hey, here's Scrum, by the way. This is a toolkit. Here's XP. Here's Kanban. Use whatever else you find on the internet or from your friends and experiment, right? And it turns out that what we really care about, we realized after a while, what really matters, the driving principle at Spotify was this, autonomous teams. We want each team to be self-directing without being dependent on other teams. So we really want to find ways of creating autonomous teams. So I'm going to talk a bit about that. We decided that autonomy is more important than consistency. Right? We don't need all the teams to be working the same way. Better if they could find their own way, even if that makes things a little bit inconsistent. So what's an autonomous... we also renamed... we stopped calling them Scrum teams. Instead we just called them squads. I don't know why we chose that word. But we wanted to get away from the word team because it can mean anything. It's such a vague word. So we just said squad, and we tried to define what we mean by this. So a squad is kind of like a Scrum team, but they don't have to do Scrum. So 6, 7 people, roughly, plus minus, and small, co-located, self-organized, sit together, manage their own process, and they have end-to-end responsibility for the stuff they build. So they own the whole pipe, right? From idea to production to maintenance, everything. This is the idea. And within the scope of its mission, so each squad has a mission, something they're put on this planet to solve. Within that scope, a squad is empowered to decide what to build, how to build it, and how to work when building it. So high level of autonomy. Not all squads are here yet. I've never seen a company with more autonomy, so the very high level of autonomy, but it's not perfect. So we have some squads that haven't achieved this yet. But we're getting there gradually. So one thing which helped a lot was office layout, right? It's inspiring to see this office layout actually. We designed the office, optimized it for agile teams. We want it to be a perfect kind of habitat for agile teams. So this is one example of a squad area. Each squad has an area like this. This is where you sit, back to back, so you can easily see each other's screens. Here's a lounge where they do planning meetings and retrospectives, process improvement meetings, things like that. And all the walls are whiteboards, which is very convenient. And here's a video conference, a big screen with a video conference, so they can... All squads are normally co-located, they sit together, but sometimes you have somebody who's somewhere else. So we need to phone them in. That's the idea. So this creates this nice atmosphere of like a mini startup. We want to create the feeling of, you guys are like a startup. You own your own destiny, right? You manage your own way of working. And some teams have a pretty narrow mission, like build radio. Make it possible to use Spotify like a radio player. And that's their mission. So within that scope, they can pick whatever feature they want to build, right? Well, this squad over here is pretty much, increase the number of users. Okay, there's a lot of ways to do that, so they're more autonomous, right? So if you look at the Spotify client here, this is the desktop client, here's one of the phone clients, so that's the iOS client. Here's an example of one squad. They're responsible for everything that has to do with organizing your own music into playlists, right? So they own this all the way from the graphical user interface all the way to the back end, and operations, everything. This is their baby, right? And then this team over here, they focus on recommendations. That team focuses on making sure that when somebody presses play, the music better come, right? And it's got to come fast. That's their job. And here they focus on iOS client as a whole. We also have some internal squads. Like some squads focus on setting up continuous delivery infrastructure, for example. Or monitoring systems. So why is this so important? Why is autonomy so important? Well, motivation is one, right? Motivation is everything when it comes to creating work. If people are happy, they tend to do a better job, build better stuff, collaborate more effectively. So yeah, autonomy makes generally fun, right? You're in control of your own destiny. Books like this, Drive, has anybody read or seen this video about Drive? Very inspiring, it talks about motivation. What he does here is he summarizes a whole lot of research which shows that the stuff that makes people tick, right? The key motivating factors are autonomy, right? Mastery and purpose. Mastery means getting better at stuff. And purpose means feeling that there is a reason why I'm here. I'm solving a high level. I'm here for a higher level purpose. So the principle of autonomous squads and a clear mission fulfills at least two of these, which is very motivating. And speed. When we scale, we can't have all these 50 teams blocked waiting for each other. So if we really make teams autonomous, they can move ahead without having to wait for decisions to be made from managers or from other teams. So this is the idea. Of course, we'll never have perfect autonomy. We're always working very hard, and a lot of the way Spotify works can be explained by the drive towards autonomy. It's triggered a lot of change. However, if we have 50 autonomous teams, if they don't talk to each other sometimes, we'll get this Frankenstein product, right? It's like 50 teams putting their own rock out. We don't want to pilot rocks, we want a beautiful cathedral, right? So they need to collaborate. So be autonomous, but don't sub-optimize. That's the idea, right? So collaborate with each other to focus on the whole. That's hard, but it's the responsibility of each squad to figure this balance out. So be a good citizen in the Spotify ecosystem. That means that, yes, you guys have a mission, but Spotify's overall mission is always more important than your mission. So sometimes you need to sacrifice your mission for the greater good. And this is culture. There's no process for this. This is culture. In other words, this is what people are talking about all the time. It's the way the management act based on this. Decisions are made on a daily basis based on these principles. And in many cases, people don't even notice it because it's so obvious, because it's part of the culture. Of course I should sacrifice my mission if I need to help another squad, which is doing something more important. So collaborate and synchronize with other squads and follow agreed upon standards. It maybe makes us all faster if we follow some design guidelines, right? If we can agree on some design guidelines, we can all move faster, right? Things like that. So the office is optimized for cross-squad collaboration. If I walk down the hallway, these are different squad areas, and outside each squad area is like a lounge also for discussion, informal discussion between squads. So a lot of important decisions get made just by, informal. People walk by and say, hey, can we go talk about this new build issue or something? Talk about this new release management process or whatever. So it's a very nice environment. So here's an example of a sprint demo. A squad has finished a new release and they have a demo. They invite whoever wants to come. So people just show up. And there is the stories that were built for this sprint. And here's the latest release. And there's a product owner talking about it. And here are some stakeholders and other squads and managers coming by. And it's very informal. But the idea is to spread knowledge and to collaborate about what we're doing. So alignment and autonomy is interesting. alignment normally is about like moving in the same direction, right? Well, autonomy is about being allowed to move in whatever direction you like. It might seem like these are opposing forces, right? It might seem like they conflict. Like either the manager says, do what I say, and everybody does what he says, and you get alignment, or the people do whatever they want, right? But I think that's a false dichotomy. And I think this is a limiting way of thinking. I find it more useful to look at it like this. Alignment enables autonomy. Look, different dimensions. So what does this mean? You know, consultants always do these matrices, these two-dimensional things, so I have to put one up there, right? Down here is low alignment, low autonomy. That means people don't know why they are here. I don't know the high-level purpose. So I just do what the manager says, right? Who cares? So, low alignment, low autonomy, micromanagement culture, people don't care. Things move very slowly. Up here is high alignment, low autonomy. High alignment means the leaders are pretty good at describing why are we here. They give a high-level goal. We need to cross the river, right? But they also tell people how to do it. So you need to build a bridge. That means, okay, yeah, high alignment, but low autonomy. The teams don't get to decide how to solve the problem. They still need to just implement the instructions, right? It's a little bit better. It's more motivating. People will make better decisions if they understand the high-level purpose. That's good. But this is where we really want to be. The leaders explain what is the high-level problem we want to solve and why. But they don't tell people how to solve it. They say, you guys figure out how. Right? So now we get innovation. Now we get true collaboration. One example was about a year ago, the CEO told everybody, okay guys, we solved playing music. We've solved that. Anybody can get Spotify, type the name of a song and play it. And it's great. They can save it. Brilliant, good job, big round of applause. But if somebody doesn't know what they want to listen to today, Spotify is useless. Because you have to type the name of a song or the name of an album, right? So what if I don't know what I want to listen to? Spotify is useless. So figure out a solution. And then, yeah, squads had to figure out solutions. So different squads did different things. Some squads started working on data mining to see if we can look for patterns in how people listen to music. Others started looking at the social networking parts, right? Others started looking at radio. People looked at this in different ways, but all aligned on the high-level purpose. So that's what alignment enables autonomy. And the better alignment you have, the more autonomy you can afford to grant. Right? With strong alignment, the managers will feel confident to give autonomy. But if there's not a strong alignment, and you give a lot of autonomy, you end up down here, which is basically people running around in different directions. Right? Very happy running around in different directions, and the manager's like, I hope somebody's working on the river problem, but I don't know. Quite helpless feeling. So we sometimes fall into this trap, and we sometimes glide towards here, but we're working very hard to try to stay here. So this is a very intentional strategy, trying to be up in this quadrant. So you might summarize that the leader's job, and that's Daniel Ek, the CEO, is to explain what problem needs to be solved and why. And then let the teams figure out how. Oh, this is out of date. I'm going to skip this one. So how do we measure? I talked about autonomy. I talked about dependencies. Right? One thing that makes autonomy difficult is dependencies. If this team needs that team to do something, we're stuck, right? So how do we solve that? Well, we can't really solve it if we can't visualize the problem. And it turns out it's actually quite easy to measure dependencies. You just ask people. Which squads are you dependent on, right? So we do this every quarter. We ask each squad and put it into a Google spreadsheet, like, this squad is depending on that squad, and what is the nature of the dependency? Is it no problem, or is it slowing us down, or is it blocking us, right? Or is it a future dependency? And then we can draw this chart. And it's very useful, because looking at this picture, we can think about, okay, which dependencies do we want to get rid of next, right? Or which dependencies are good dependencies that we want to optimize? We can have a discussion. The goal is to eliminate all bad dependencies, and the first step is to visualize them. So how to get rid of dependencies? Well, sometimes by changing the architecture, sometimes by rearranging teams, sometimes by changing our routines or process, so all kinds of ways. But this helps quite a lot, an open source model. The Spotify architecture is based on hundreds of little systems that run independently, right? Playlist management system, the login system, monitoring system, all of these different systems. Hundreds of independent processes running and talking to each other through standard protocols. And each system is owned by a squad. In fact, there's more systems than squads, so most squads own multiple systems. But ownership doesn't mean we're the only ones allowed to touch the code. Ownership just means we're the ones who kind of keep an eye on the quality of this, right? And we're the ones who know this system best. So what that means is, imagine if squad A wants something done here in system B, right? Well, what they'll normally do is they say, hi guys, can you please implement this thing we need up here in system B? And this squad B here, they're also autonomous, right? So they may say, sure, we'll be happy to do that. Or they might say, no way, we got other stuff to do, right? And if they say, no way, we got other stuff to do, then squad A has some options. What they're not going to do is wait. We hate waiting, right? So they won't just put it in the backlog and wait. Instead, they'll typically either find a third-party solution of their own, right? Which can cause a bit of duplication. And that's okay, that's the price we pay, in a way. So we get a bit of duplication of code. But more often, they'll just, clone this project and change the code themselves. And then they'll ask for a code review. So they say, hi, Squad B, we've now changed this code. So here's a pull request, and please give me feedback. And what happens then is that A, they get the problem solved, right? B, they learn about this product. So and C, we learn from each other. We get some relationships building. So it's a very powerful model, and this is pretty much inspired by the open source world, right? So it's like an internal open source model. Anybody else doing that? Something similar, an internal open source model? Just curious if this is common. Another consequence of autonomy is minimum standardization. So what that means is, it's quite frustrating sometimes. Like, as a coach, I ask somebody, so, how does Spotify, how do we plan? Oh, it depends on which squad. What about, how do we test? Depends on which squad. No matter what I ask, the answer is always depends on which squad. There's almost never a single answer. It's very frustrating. But I realize it's also very powerful. Because that means people get to find whatever way works for them. But what's also interesting is we get standardization anyway. Because we get it via cross-pollination. I'll talk about that later. Like a cross-pollination where instead of somebody setting a standard, like we're going to use Git, right? We say anybody can use whatever they want. If you want to use Visual Source Safe, go ahead. Right? We're going to use Git. And then after a while, these guys get inspired by, why are these guys so much faster than those guys, right? Because those guys are always having trouble with branching and merging and stuff. So they start using Git, and then it spreads. And after a while, these guys start feeling alone. Our code is living in a different universe, and we're always getting blocked. And it spreads, and after a while, one of the infrastructure teams might decide to start supporting Git. They'll build tools, and they'll do training, So now Git is the path of least resistance, right? So when a new squad is formed, people are like, which version control system should we use? Well, why not use Git? It's what everybody else is using. It's easiest. So unless we have another reason to use something else, we'll just use whatever everybody else is using. It's not always the best tool. Sometimes we're stuck with tools that are not great, but everybody's using it, so I might as well just use it. But the end result is we get a pretty good consistency anyway, but it's not forced, it's not centralized. It's spread through cross-pollination, right? And this is just one example of cross-pollination. I was walking in the corridor, and this thing rolled by me about a few months ago. Now I bought one of my own, but this is an iPad on a stick on wheels. And it said hello to me, and it rolled past. So somebody was sitting inside his, I don't know where he was, in which part of the world, and he was rolling around the office with this remote controlled iPad on wheels. It's called double robotics. It's a really cool thing. And he's not trying to tell anybody to use this. He's just using it. And he's going around, and everybody's like, wow, I want to use that too. And this is how ideas spread, tools spread, right? People inspire each other. So now we have a few of these. Of course, the best is to be in the same location, but if you're in a different location, it's quite cool to be able to log into one of these and drive around. Right, so how do squads actually work then? Is it totally different, or is there anything in common? It turns out that, yeah, after interviewing a bunch of squads, I noticed that there is some patterns. Almost all squads they feel that they own quality. They have their own testers, and there's no handoffs to anybody else. Quality is our baby, right? They sit together, just about all squads sit together. They have a mission. Pretty much any squad has a clear mission. They have a product owner, a Scrum product owner, who sits in the team, in the same room. It seems to be universal at Spotify. And they have an agile approach. Largely thanks to the agile coaches. We have about 20 or more agile coaches all over the place now. Each one has a couple of teams. So they spread the agile mindset. Most squads do demonstrate their product to stakeholders on a regular basis. Most of them have task boards, like physical boards with cards. Some do electronic versions. Just like I see you have a few boards here. Most of them, in fact, I'll say almost all of them do retrospectives. Sprints or Kanban, or some combination. Just about most squads have an agile coach, and they do daily stand-ups, right? Some squads, but not very many, do measure velocity and estimate. It's quite rare. Quite few squads do estimation. And very few use burn-up charts and burn-down charts. And very few do Scrum of Scrums, which is interesting. Like, well, that's it. How do we have 50 teams? Scrum of Scrums is the practice of having a daily meeting across multiple teams. It turns out that we try to minimize the need of Scrum of Scrums. If we're really good at autonomy, then teams can move ahead without having to synchronize all the time, right? Sometimes, though, we have big projects that involve a bunch of squads. In those cases, yeah, we do like a daily sync meeting, which is like Scrum of Scrums. But we haven't standardized that in any way. So I can't tell you this is right or wrong. This just is. This is an observation. This is how they currently work. But it keeps changing. But the key thing is the squads own their own process. They decide what things to do, what things to try. Now, of course, at the end of the day, what really matters is people. Right? People are the culture. So what I find really interesting about Spotify, and I don't really know how they manage this, is that there's an amazing amount of respect. Like, there have been external people coming in doing interviews, deep interviews with Spotify people, and they get shocked. They're like, wow, I've never seen this. Everybody's always talking about how awesome the colleagues are. And I never hear anybody say, oh, that guy's a jerk, right? So there seems to be a very strong culture of mutual respect and very little ego. I'm not sure why or how they manage that. That's just an observation. But maybe some of it has to do with this. We have a department called POPs, People Operations, right? And it's like HR but not evil. It's like a people-focused group, and they focus on building a strong culture. And this was the manager of People Operations sent an email to everybody this was about half a year ago. And he said, "Hi everyone. Our employee satisfaction survey says 91% enjoy working here, and 4% don't enjoy it here." When I read this, I was like, wow, that's really cool. And I thought he was going to say, isn't that great? But no, guess what he said? Yeah, this is a problem, right? This is not satisfactory. We want to fix it. Those guys here, we have people who are not satisfied here. We got to fix that, right? So if you're one of those unhappy 4%, please contact us because we're here for you, nothing else. We're here to help. So it's anonymous survey, so you don't have to show up.
So when it's 5%, because
91 plus 4 equals 95. That's correct. Yeah. So some people didn't. Some people were in between, right? The 5% were like, I don't really enjoy it, but I don't not enjoy it. or people who didn't answer, right? So there's this gray zone. But 91% were clearly yes, and 4% were clearly no, not enjoying it. Right? So this one, and now it's up. Now I think it's about 95%, and I think we're at pretty much 0% now. So it really helps to have this strong focus on what to fix, instead of just being happy about what's good. So a lot of people, I wrote an article about our structure about a year ago, and a lot of people are curious about our structure with tribes and guilds and chapters. And how many of you have read that article, Spotify article? Some of you. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But what's really important is not really the structure, it's community. So we focus a lot on creating a community. And I'll show you a bit about that. We have about 50 or more squads now, and they're grouped into tribes. A tribe is like a department, right? Each tribe is, we have I think 6 or 7 tribes, and they're spread across 4 cities. And the tribes are designed to not be too big, right? So maybe 100 people at most. So people have a chance to get to know each other. And normally all the squads inside a tribe are closely located to each other. So you can have lunch together, things like that. So one example of a tribe could be focusing on the music player. Another tribe could be focusing on infrastructure. Right? Etc. So each tribe has a focus area. And each tribe has a tribe lead, a manager, who focuses on creating a good environment for those squads. And each tribe is like a matrix. So here's an example of a tribe matrix. Each squad, right, has a PO. Each squad is responsible for delivering something within their domain, within their scope, or their mission. But then on this dimension we have chapters. A chapter is like a competence area. So everybody doing back-end development would be the back-end chapter. Or people doing quality assistance, which is our word for like test, QA, quality assistance. We changed that. And so they would form another chapter. And if I'm a tester here, then my line manager would be maybe here. If I'm a back-end developer here, maybe my line manager is there. Right? So the line managers are also inside a squad. What this does, it creates a supporting structure. So I'm a squad member, I have a PO to help guide what to build next, what is our product focus. I have a chapter lead to help guide me in terms of becoming good at my profession. Right? And if I switch squads, I normally keep the same chapter. So I don't need to change manager just because I change squads. So we have a quite flexible model where if you want to change to another squad, then just go. It's not a big bureaucracy. So here's another tribe, right? Now it's not this straight lines. It looks pretty on this picture. In reality, it's a lot messier, right? But this is the rough structure. And a guild is a lightweight community of interest. So for example, all the web developers in Spotify, anybody who's interested in web development could join the web development chapter. Anybody interested in leadership would join the leadership chapter, or a leadership guild. I'm talking about guilds, right? So web development guild, leadership guild, agile guild. Anybody can create a guild. Anybody can join any number of guilds or leave any guild. So it's very organic. And what guilds do is they trade knowledge across the whole company. So this is a typical meetup we have. Twice per year in most guilds, we fly everybody together to some big conference center, and we do a whole day, we call it an unconference, like an open space conference. In this case, the discussion was, you can't see it, but back here it says, what are our challenges in web development, and what are we going to do about it, right? So people show up at this. Here's more pictures from unconferences, very nice format about it. I wrote a short book called How to Run an Internal Unconference. If you're curious about this, you can just Google it. It's on LeanPub. You can even get it for free. So, structure, yes, we have some kind of a structure, but what really matters is this. Collaboration happens along more vague lines, right? A lot of informal communication channels. People communicating over the coffee machine, right? Or people having lunch together. So our structure is just a minimum support, right? It gives a little bit of support. But the most important stuff happens informally. So here's another quote from a manager. If you need to know exactly who is making decisions, you're in the wrong place, right? Because there is no clear decision-making process. It's very organic. Just like in an open source community, typically. What we've noticed, though, is that one of the key enablers of autonomy is how easy it is to release stuff. Right? If a squad can release stuff easily, they can act autonomously. Otherwise, they can't. So we put a lot of focus on this because we notice that there's a vicious cycle. If releasing is hard, if it's a pain in the ass to get a release out the door, then people are not going to want to release so often, right? They're going to be like, oh, let's wait. Let's do release every year or maybe every 2 years. And of course, that makes releasing big, right? The release is big because you don't do it so often. And when the release is big, guess what happens? You guys are tired. You gotta speak up, man. Yeah? I've been teaching all day. I'm the tired guy. Okay, yeah. So speak up, yeah? If you release seldom, yeah, you get big releases. And the big release is hard. So, vicious cycle, right? It hurts to release, we'll do it seldom, and oh shit, now it hurts even more. So, the idea is to turn this around. If we can make releasing easy, we make it automated as much as possible. We make releasing boring, right? Then we can do it all the time. And if we release very often, every week, then releases are small, and that makes it even easier. And if something blows up, it's easy to fix. We can even just roll back, right? Because it's not a big deal. So we work, most squads are in this positive cycle and working hard to stay there. Because once you're over here, it's hard to get out, right? Anybody here stuck on this left side? Does this look familiar? Hand up. Just a few. What about how many people feel like you're more on the right side over here? Hand up. A few, and the rest of you are sleeping, right? Cool. The rest of you maybe don't release at all. Another thing we learned was decouple as much as possible. This was our original client. It was like one fat client, which was okay when we had just 2 teams. But then when we had like 10, 15, 20 teams, this became a big blocker because now all the teams have to collaborate to get a release out the door, right? We need to get the client to a stable state so we can release it. But the client's never in a stable state because people are always doing stuff, right? So we changed the fundamental architecture. And this was, I think, a very good example of an agile culture. Actually changing the architecture to make releasing easier. Instead of just accepting, right? So we turned this fat client into a web browser, pretty much. Now the Spotify client looks like a normal application, but actually it's a web browser in disguise. So each section is like a frame, which means that every squad can make their own releases, just like on a frame on a web page. You can just release it, right, on an iframe. And they don't need to synchronize with each other as much. They don't need to be on the same release cycle, just get it out. And we still have a so-called container squad that owns the whole client, and they will focus on things that make it easier for other teams to release stuff, right? So they own the whole container. Which means that we don't need to release the whole container as often because people are releasing their own stuff inside the container all the time. And now we pretty much have 3 types of squads. And keep in mind, none of the stuff I'm talking about was designed. We never had like a grand master plan. This is evolution, driven by the need for autonomy, right? So, oh shit, what's in the way of autonomy right now? It's too hard to release. What's making it hard to release? Our big monolith client. So what needs to change? The architecture. Okay, who's going to do it? We'll do it, right? So that's the process. And so now we have 3 types of squads. We have feature squads, which is, most squads are feature squads. They build features, and deliver them, and maintain them. Then we have 4 container squads. Each one owns like one client, right? And if this squad is going to build a new playlist management system, their job is to build it and release it on all 4 platforms. So there's no handoff. It's not like, hey, I finished building it, now you have to release it. Instead, they put stuff into production on all platforms. So the container squad's job is to make that possible. So they create APIs and platforms to make it possible for these guys to release stuff on the platforms, right? So it's a self-service model. We won't do your job for you. We'll make it possible for you to do your job yourself. Same thing with operations. We have infrastructure squads, things like building tools, doing operations, things like that. There's no handoff. It's not like, hey, yeah, you guys put my stuff into production. It's more like the operations team makes it possible for other squads to put their own stuff into production, right? And this is very much built into the culture, very important. Like, no handoffs whenever possible. And one thing that we've now started doing is release trains. And this is quite common, I believe. I know at least Google and Facebook and other companies are starting to do this more often. Which means that instead of waiting, for the client to reach a stable state and releasing, we just have a fixed release cycle. So every 3 weeks, there's a new version of this client. For the web client, it's every week. I think for the iPhone, it's every 3 weeks. It varies. And that means that there's always a release, no matter what. It's on schedule, right? And that means that we don't know what's going to be in the release. Whatever is done is going to be in the release. So this squad here, they worked on feature A. It was done before the release, so it got included. This squad worked on feature B. It got done. And they're in the middle of feature E. And E was not done. But it also gets released, actually. Everything gets released. And the stuff that was not finished gets hidden. So we have feature toggles. Right? Which is very powerful, because that means we don't need as many branches. We can just always put stuff on the trunk and release it. Of course, this means that teams have to be kind of careful, right? With what stuff how you build stuff, because my stuff will be released. When the release train comes, it's going to go out the door. And this is nice because it allows people to experiment. We can do releases to just a small population. We can do A/B testing. Where if some feature is not working well, we can disable it and try things out. So it's a powerful model. But it impacts the architecture, of course. It took a lot of work to get to the position where any team can just get their stuff onto the release train and disable and enable stuff. Anybody doing something similar? Release train, feature toggles. I believe it's a model which is getting popular. Very nice, actually. It makes planning easier too. Everybody knows there's going to be a release. You can measure velocity, how much stuff got into each release. Although we don't do that, but I think we should. We are pushing for continuous delivery. We have some squads that are really good at it, some that are catching up. But on the whole, there is an incredible strong focus right now on Spotify at building continuous delivery. What does that mean? Well, it means that if I commit my code here, it gets built automatically. And that's just continuous integration, right? It gets built automatically, and then it gets tests run, and it gets integration tested automatically, and it gets deployed automatically to a staging environment. And what happens after that? Well, there is some manual tests, exploratory testing, things like that. So we look at it. Does it feel right? Does it look right? But then after that, it's one click to get this into production. This is the vision. Some teams are here already. Some teams are not quite there yet. But it's amazing how much productivity you get when you can easily just commit stuff and get it out the door. Anyone else here working on trying to get continuous delivery? It's just a few. It's interesting. I'd like to explore that some more, but I won't do that now. So how do we do this? Well, once we realize that we're good at all these things, but we're pretty bad at engineering practices. We got to catch up. So we created a guild, a continuous delivery guild. And we even have a few squads now that focus just on supporting other squads and getting continuous delivery. And what this guild does is they find all the success stories. Who's good at this? These guys are good at it. Can you come and do a talk? Or can you send the guy over to some other teams and inspire them, right? And they bring in guest speakers and send out people to conferences. And it's all about creating excitement and buzz around the idea of continuous delivery. Because once enough teams are doing it, it becomes contagious. Other teams get jealous. Look at those guys. I didn't even think that was possible. Look what they're doing. They just come in and go home. Shit. I want to do that too, right? It's the best way to cause change. Yeah. Now, another core principle at Spotify is the idea of trust. And it's really hard to build trust. But once you have it, you really need to treasure it. Because if you lose it, it's hard to get it back. But what that basically means is we trust our people to make informed decisions about the way they work and what they work on. I see a lot of managers say words like this at other companies, but often they're not true. They sound good on the wiki or on a speech, but it's not actually true. I think Spotify is the first company I've seen where it actually is true. I can ask any developer, do you agree to this? They mostly say, yeah. So it's very interesting. But this only works if there's no politics, right? So here's another quote from a guy. Agile culture demands that there are no internal politics allowed. And the best way to avoid that is 100% transparency. Everything is visible. There's no hidden agendas anymore, right? You release very often. Data is visible. Data about the product is visible. There's no place for bad things to hide, right? This is going to be hard because Spotify is growing fast. I'm sure we're going to have to deal with more and more politics at some point. But so far we've been very careful in really making sure it doesn't come in, right? Another thing that's not allowed is fear. Agile at scale requires trust at scale. If people are afraid, that causes all kinds of bad stuff. This is a good quote from Valve, game company, very popular, and also known for an agile culture. When you give people the freedom to create without fear of failure, amazing things happen. I'll give a negative example. This is, Netflix? Yeah? Also a famous company, right? And also famous for an agile culture. They have some pretty inspiring material on the net about their culture. But there's one thing they have trouble with, and that is a culture of fear. And maybe that's why they dropped down to here, on the motivation scale, right? Even below like Oracle and Microsoft and these other big, boring companies. I think it's because of the fear, because I've been reading, I've talked to people working there, and I'm hearing things like this. Here's a quote from an HR manager at Netflix. The reward for doing a good job today is having a job tomorrow. Yeah. Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Or an employee, they love firing people for things that aren't under the employee's entire control. Turnover is so quick that it's almost unnecessary to unpack your bag. Right? So it seems like it's an elite culture, right? So they seem to be doing a lot of stuff good, but this is a problem, and it conflicts with Agile. Because if people are afraid, they won't experiment, right? They'll just do safe bets. Maybe this has changed. Some of this material is over a year old. Actually, no. This is from June. Never mind what I just said. Because failing is learning. This is Facebook mantra. Move fast and break things. Right? This is Valve.
Exactly.
What?
Exactly.
Exactly. Valve. Screwing up is a great way to find out that your assumptions were wrong. This is an example of the culture of failing is okay. This is a fail wall at Spotify. One of the squads has on the wall a fail wall. They show off about their failures. They put up a sticky note. I screwed up the DNS and blah blah, and here's what I learned. Oh, here's, look, I overslept and missed the whole release meeting. Just, putting up these notes and laughing about it. It's funny, right? We fail, then we learn stuff about it. Keep calm and fail. That's what it says on the door. This is the blog, internal Spotify blog. We see often articles like, how we shot ourselves in the foot. So someone's telling a story of how they screwed up and what they learned. This is the CTO who wrote an article called Celebrate Failure, encouraging people to fail fast if you're going to fail. So it really helps to have this culture, right? But I'm going to talk a little bit about how we support failure. One is, of course, retrospectives and postmortems. I mean, if people fail, they also need to learn. Otherwise, it's just failing, right? So whenever we fail, we need to learn. And the way we do that is typically the Agile coaches will be organizing retrospectives after every sprint or every release, after every major project. Whenever anything interesting happens, we do a meetup, right? Sometimes small, sometimes big. Sometimes it's a fancy, well-organized thing. Sometimes it's just an informal picnic in the park. It varies. But the focus is always, it's not whose fault was it, it's about what did we learn? And what are we going to change, right? What happened, what did we learn, what are we going to change? Happening all the time. And most importantly, it's driven from below. And it's supported from above. So it's not driven from above, it's driven from below. So I like this metaphor. Failure recovery is more important than failure avoidance for an Agile culture. This is, anybody have kids here? Yeah? Small kids. I have 4 kids, small children. And if I wanted to keep them all safe, I would just lock them in, right? Be safe, safe baby. This baby, you know, is not getting hurt. Of course, it's not a very happy baby, and he's not learning very fast. This baby is happy. This baby is trying things, running around, learning, developing fast, and falling on his face sometimes, getting hurt. Fortunately, you know, we heal. Kids heal faster than grown-ups. So as long as we avoid fatal mistakes, failure recovery is more important than failure avoidance. And this is also the culture of a good agile company, right? But to support this, once again, architecture. How do we make a fail-friendly architecture? In this case, we have this concept of limited blast radius, which means that we've built a system so that if someone screws up, like, you know, the team that's working on the album art screws up, then this part will work. But the rest of the client will normally work. The rest of the infrastructure will be fine. People can still listen to music. It's just going to be empty right here for a little while. Because that squad will feel a very high urgency. Oh shit, we screwed up. There's no hiding. This is our part. We got to fix it now. It's embarrassing. Or over there, maybe the login information is screwed up. So sometimes we get major failures, but quite rarely. Mostly it's just small failures. But this gives squads courage to try things, because the consequences are limited. Also, we do gradual rollout. Like when we roll out a new feature, it's normally just rolled out to 1% of the world population, or maybe just one country. Which means that if we screw up, well, sorry guys, it's just 200,000 people. Wait, that's quite a lot, isn't it? We have 20 million users. But okay, yeah, it's just those 200,000 people that we disappoint. But actually, when a squad screws up, it's normally just one small part of the system for a small number of users and for a short period of time. Sometimes even just minutes. So as a result, most people don't notice. So Spotify is breaking all the time. But people mostly don't notice. And that gives squads courage to experiment and try things. Once we did a fun experiment, we shut down the login servers, the whole login service. So everybody got kicked out, right? This was called the login storm experiment. Because what happens when we kick everybody out? What's going to happen? Everybody's going to log in again. So login storm. This was to check, does this actually scale? And we didn't know if it was going to succeed. We didn't know. So maybe we'll just break the whole Spotify. Why would we do something like that? Any suggestion? Why would we expose ourselves to this risk? Yeah, it's a control. If it's going to break, it's better to break when everybody's ready. Everybody's watching, right? Otherwise, it might break on Sunday night, someday. So yeah, login storm. So 100% control. If you really want 100% control, shut down your company, right? Tell everybody to go home. Don't do anything. Then you have 100% control, but 0% motion, right? As soon as people are moving, you have to leave some control behind. So this is a good quote from a famous race car driver, Mario Andretti. If everything is under control, you're going too slow. It's a good metaphor. So, let's see. Where are we in this presentation? Let's take just a 2-minute, just stand up, right? Talk to your neighbor about something interesting that you've learned so far. Just a couple of minutes. Stay in the room, okay? And then we'll continue, but I want to give you some energy. Get me some water. Yeah, okay, yeah, great. Cool. Thanks. Cool, thanks a lot. So, is this interesting? Is this what you wanted to hear about, this kind of stuff? Just check, show of hands. How many think this is it? Okay, good. Otherwise we can talk about something else. We can talk about vacation. Kolanta. Right. So I'll be around afterwards to chat, have discussions, questions, whatever. But I just want to run through the core materials so we can get that done with. one core principle of both Agile and Lean is servant leadership. And it really is part of the culture of Spotify and many other Agile companies I've seen. And what that really means is a manager's job is not to tell people what to do. And it's not to have control. You gotta let go of that. Right? And when you can stop spending time trying to control people, you can instead spend time coaching, mentoring, enabling people to solve their own problems. Right? You can help teams solve their impediments, their problems that they can't solve themselves. It's a coaching type of management. But leadership roles tend to change in an Agile company. Yeah, so how can I help? Would be the right thing to say, not, why aren't you done yet? So how the hell do you find out what's going on in a company like this? We have some roadmaps and things like that, but how do you actually know what's going on? All the squads are self-organizing, autonomous units. Where's the big picture? Well, this is from Valve Employee Handbook, and it's very similar to Spotify in that sense. Methods to find out what's going on. Talk to somebody in a meeting, or talk to somebody in the elevator, or talk to someone in the kitchen, or talk to someone in the bathroom.
Most of the time people always do skip to step 4.
Skip step 4. And so it can be frustrating sometimes. But if you just have the courage to get off your seat and go talk to somebody, you'll probably find out what you need. Now, one thing that I think is interesting about Spotify too is the culture of focusing on value, not so much on velocity. So velocity is like, how much stuff can we deliver? And our model for building products is summarized in this mantra, which is think it, build it, ship it, tweak it. And what that really means is when we want to build something major new, if we're just going to build a small feature, then just build it, right? But if we're going to build something new and something more involved, that's going to involve a new team or multiple teams, spend some idea thinking about the problem, right? Why are we building this? What impact do we think this is going to have on the world? And typically write a press release, right? So when we're going to build a radio product, the first Spotify radio product, the mantra was, radio you can save. Because there's lots of other radio products. What's unique about Spotify is you can save. If you hear a cool song you like, you can save it in a playlist and listen to it anytime you like, right? That was the kind of unique selling proposition. And then we write like a press release, pretending that this product is already done. Right? Write a press release. And create prototypes, lo-fi prototypes, paper prototypes. And do user testing. Now not all squads are doing this, but more and more are doing it. So it's becoming part of our culture. Get real users involved, focus groups, and try the prototypes on them. And once we feel convinced that, yes, we should build radio, or we should build social networking, whatever we're building, right? Then we set up a hypothesis. So we think if we release this product, we're going to get 10% more music sharing for those people. They'll share music more often, right? Hypothesis. So then the next job, this is based on lean startup principles, the next task is build a minimum viable product. What is the least simplest product we can build that's going to prove something, right? So we don't need a feature complete radio system, we just need a very simple system that's enough to provide this value, radio you can save, but not feature complete. You might call it narrative complete, but not feature complete. And then put that into production. So the squad does that, they put it into production, and they measure. So they don't put it into production for everybody, they just do it for a few % of all the users. And they monitor the data. So we have a system where it's quite easy for a squad to set up a dashboard. And they have it literally on the screen, right in the squad room. On the screen, they can see real-time data. And they can see, okay, is the control group listening to more music or not, right? Is this having an impact? And normally it turns out that our hypothesis was wrong. Oh shit, they're not listening to more music, they're listening to less music. Right? We gotta tweak. So that's where tweak comes in, make changes. And figure out how are we gonna get people to share more music or listen to more music or whatever we're trying to achieve. And once we see the metrics proving to us that yes, this feature is causing an impact, then we gradually roll it out to the rest of the world. Right? What's nice about that, it gives us time too, to figure out things like what impact does this feature have on the server load? Do we need to get a new hosting center? Do we need more servers? Or do we need to optimize? So we can very carefully roll it out. And by doing this experimentally, we don't need to have a lot of upfront planning. Right? We can try something out, learn what happens, and then gradually roll it out and improve our technical environment. So this is the basic pattern of a new product development at Spotify. Focusing very much on the value and not so much on the velocity, right? So you might call this impact-driven development. The feature isn't done when it's released, it's done when the impact has been achieved. And a lot of companies are experimenting with similar approaches. This is inspired by Gojko Adjik. He's written a book called Impact Mapping. Maybe some of you have seen it. Good book. Right. What's important though is that this squad owns the responsibility all the way until the impact is measured.
It's not like a validate column in the lead time.
Yeah, it's like the validate column, and these are similar, yeah. So it doesn't look like this, all the squads have a different way of doing it, but the basic mindset is we're not finished until we've measured an impact. And sometimes, if we don't measure the impact, then guess what they do? If we can't get the impact that we want, yeah, throw it away. And that's also an important cultural thing. Even if we've invested money in building a feature, if it doesn't make a difference, it's better to throw it away. Why? It's going to cause complexity in our system if we add it, right? So if we remove it, we don't need to maintain it. So that's an important mindset. And also this about flexibility and innovation. Basically, waterfall is very much about predictability, right? We have these Gantt charts and these requirements documents and everything is about trying to predict, which is ironic because it never succeeds in predicting anything. But Scrum is kind of a little bit in between innovation and predictability. You have some things in Scrum that are about predictability. Story points, velocity, burn down charts, the so-called sprint commitment, although that word is now gone from Scrum. Estimating tasks in hours. This is comfortable for people who are used to waterfall. But if you go one step further, companies like Spotify are really about innovation. So we don't do a lot of this. It's more like do what you need, right? Innovate. And that means we can't predict what's going to happen. We can't predict innovation. So unleash innovation. You don't need to plan innovation. People want to innovate. They generally want to innovate. So a lot of companies have figured this out. Facebook has a hackathon every few months, let people build whatever they want. The Google 20% time is famous. In my first book, Scrum Gathering from the Trenches, I wrote about Lab Day and Last Friday every month. People can do whatever they want. At Spotify, we have the notion of hack days, which is everybody can do whatever they want, 10% of their time, roughly. What we noticed was that it's hard to get something done in just a day. So more and more people are grouping together into a hack week. And more and more people are doing it together with the whole squad. So they save up for a hack week, and they do a whole week. And finally, so this is an example of a product that came out of a hack week, right? Just a silly thing, a dial a song, right? I was like, what the heck? I pick up the phone, and I dial 2, and it plays a song. So they integrated this analog phone with the Spotify infrastructure for fun. That might seem kind of silly, it's not a very useful product, but now there's all kinds of really awesome integrations between Spotify and all kinds of hardware. And that's spawned by innovation. People are allowed to play around, they learn stuff, right? So experiments and data. It's a lot about experimentation. When we have discussions like, are we going to use tool A or tool B, right? Which one is right? Instead of just arguing about it, try both, right? Try them, and we'll see which one is best. Or do we really need scrums, or whatever practice we're wondering about? Let's skip it and see if we miss it, right? Instead of arguing, we just try. Or should the user interface be organized vertically or horizontally? Try both. A/B test, right? Should we merge these two tribes? Organizational change. I don't know. Let's try. So even big experiments. We'll merge these two tribes for maybe half a year, see what happens. So instead of ego-driven decisions or opinion-driven decisions or authority-driven decisions, it's a lot more about data-driven decisions. Try things out. So if you go walk around in the hallways, you hear a lot of conversations that are like, what's the hypothesis? What do we think is going to happen? Or what did we learn when we tried this, right? What will we try next? Very much about trying stuff. So quite often we'd be using a certain way of working for several years, and then we throw it away because it's not working anymore, because now we've grown out of it, right? Or we implemented some tool or some technology which was great for a while, and then we threw it away. It's no longer needed. And that's okay. It's not like someone screwed up. We built something and threw it away, so someone must have screwed up. It's more like we tried it, we learned something, now we're moving on. So what's important though is if we're going to try things, we have to have the courage to stop doing things as well. So that's where the lean principles comes in, a waste-repellent culture, right? The Spotify people are allergic to waste. They hate waste. So they have no, if anything feels wrong, they'll just not do it, throw it away. Which means that they're happy to try things. If it works, keep it, otherwise dump it. So useless meetings, they just disappear. We used to have, or actually I don't think we've even done this, PMO, product management roles. We don't have any. We've realized that product management is not a role. It's a behavior, right? So sometimes we need people acting, doing project management type stuff, then that type of person will do that type of work. But we don't hire project managers. We don't have that as a static role. In fact, we hardly even have projects. Time reporting, nowhere to be seen. Handoffs, very little. And when we have handoffs from one team to another, typically that's like treated as a source of waste. We have to stop doing it. Acceptance test phase is nothing like that. We don't have test teams. Testers are involved inside the team. Almost nobody estimates tasks. Most of these things we tried. We tried them, concluded that it doesn't work for us. Maybe it works for other companies, but for us, no. So we just stopped it. But I really like that they're happy to try things, right? And happy to throw them away when they don't work. So corporate bullshit in general, just out the window, right? Yeah. Keepers, stuff that we keep, we like, retrospectives, great. Daily stand-up, great. Almost everybody does it. Google Docs, we use it for almost everything. Git, on conferences I talked about, spreading very quickly. So yeah, who knows what this list is going to look like next year? I don't know. So this is supported by, we have a lot of improvement boards. Each tribe has like some kind of a board which includes, it's about process improvement. What are we going to improve next, right? Some of them are organized around the notion of a definition of awesome. So we ask things like, what would awesome look like for your tribe, or your squad, or your project, or your product? As an example, what is awesome architecture, right? Well, awesome architecture means I can build and test and ship my feature in a week. And I use real data to learn from it. And my improved version is live in week 2. Wouldn't that be awesome? Most squads aren't here yet. But by just agreeing that this is where we want to be, it helps the improvement efforts, because now we can talk about, how awesome are we? Are we getting close, right? Awesome autonomy. Fully empowered to decide what to build and how. I'm never blocked on other squads, and I always get help when we need it. Not very realistic, maybe, but it's a vision, right? It's not a place, it's a direction. We want to move closer and closer and closer and closer. So typically here's all these are improvement themes, such as awesome architecture or awesome autonomy. And if you open up this ticket, you get a subboard with improvement stories. What is one thing we can do to get better autonomy? One step in the right direction. Each board looks different. Each tribe has their own improvement board. But the key is that we treat improvement kind of like any backlog, right? It's just stuff we do. Very useful. So here's an example of implementing this model using an approach called Toyota Kata, although we've simplified it a little bit. Anybody read that book, by the way, Toyota Kata? It describes the DNA of how Toyota approaches improvement. Our version of it is pretty much, here's a chart, and the squad picks one problem that they want to improve, and they describe the current situation. What is our current situation with testing, right? Bad. Okay, it's bad. What would awesome look like? No bugs, right? Etc. Great. And what would be the next target condition? What would one step towards awesome look like? How would we measure that? So current situation, Awesome. Next target condition. And based on that, 6 weeks from now in this case, right? Where do we want to be in 6 weeks? So this is a retrospective technique. And then, okay, here's where we want to be in 6 weeks. What are the first 3 steps? We only need 3. We don't need a big master plan. We just need the first 3 steps that we're going to implement. Concrete actions that will take us in this direction, right? So this becomes the output of the retrospective. It goes up on the wall, gets followed up, next retrospective, etc. It's like a mini task board that lives next to the normal task board. So this is just an example of how it looks like. It depends on the squad, of course, right? But quite typical way of approaching it in a squad, Spotify squad. So here's an example of what we learned about big projects just by experimenting, right? Avoid them. First of all. Our definition of big project is anything that involves multiple squads for an extended period of time, like several months, right? So if it's 3 or 4 months, 5 or 6 squads, that means big project, and it means bad news, right? So avoid it whenever possible. Split the work into smaller pieces. But sometimes we can't avoid it. Sometimes we have something big we need to do. We're like, shit, okay, we got to do a big project. Darn, right? And here's what we learned about how to do it. For us, daily sync, like this, Scrum of Scrums. Everybody involved, one person from each squad at least, meets every day in front of a dependency board. And the dependency board just charts, every squad reports, what dependencies do we have trouble with right now, right? Like we're waiting for those guys for something, and those guys are waiting for those guys, right? Put it all up on the wall, and then talk about how we're going to solve these dependencies now, today. So it's all about getting rid of dependencies all the time, right? That's this daily meeting. Great. Another great thing is weekly demo. So we have maybe 8 squads working on a project together. They're doing Kanban, they're doing Scrum with 1-week sprints, they're doing Scrum with 3-week sprints, and they're doing I have no idea what, right? So how do we stay in sync? Well, we just say, I don't care how you work, but every Friday there's going to be a demo in the cafeteria where anybody can come. And whatever the integrated product looks like, that's going to be demonstrated. So if this sucks, you're going to be embarrassed, right? So now the squads have to collaborate. Oh shit, it's going to be a demo, right? So, we better sort out this problem. So regardless of what sprint cycle or Kanban or whatever, then every Friday there's this demo, and that allows us, that triggers collaboration, it triggers integration, and it also gives us a chance to evaluate the overall product. Are we making progress? Are we moving in the right direction, right? Here's a fun experiment we did. Personal bonus system. This was a big experiment. Most people have forgot about it. It was a long time ago. We're like, somebody in the management, I think, was like, we should have a bonus system. Pay extra money to people who are really good. Does anybody have that kind of system in your company? Personal bonus system? So most literature I've read says that personal bonus systems don't work. But management wanted to try it, so okay, let's try it, right? Maybe the books are wrong. Turned out the books were right. we pretty much asked the teams, if there was a personal bonus system, how would it look like? How would you like it to look like? And the teams pretty much said, peer appreciation token. So every person has 5 tokens they can give to anybody else who they think deserves a bonus, right? For whatever reason. So maybe I think this guy was awesome, I'll give you all my tokens. Actually, I'll give 1 to you. You get 1, you get 4, right? Right? Etc. And then at the end of the year, it's just, here's a big pile of cash, and we allocate it based on how many tokens you have, right? That was the experiment. Did that for 1 year. Management followed up with the team. So how did this feel? And they're like, we don't need this. This is not what drives us, right? This will just cause self-optimization. We're not here because of this personal bonus. We're here because we, really care about this product. So just skip the bonus. Just give that out as salary instead. Just spread out that money as salary, and we'll do a good job anyway, right? So yeah, so that's what they did. So what I thought was interesting though was that A, they did this thing as an experiment. B, they followed up on it. And C, they took it away, but it didn't work. And no hard feelings. Very interesting. So Dan Pink was right, yeah. And another big experiment, tech-wide hack week. What if we do everybody at once, the whole company? Right? 1 whole week. Everybody can do whatever they want. With whoever they want. In whatever way they want. Anybody can do whatever they want for a week. what's going to happen? Build whatever you want with whoever in however way, and then we have a demo and party on Friday. So it's kind of like shutting down the whole company. And it turned out that it was a huge success. People loved it. And all these really cool new products were built. Some were just prototypes, but some were ready for production in just 1 week. So a lot of the managers were like, what the hell? We just let people do whatever they want for a week, and suddenly they can build the whole thing in a week. Why? Well, because exactly the right people got together to build that thing, and they knew they only had a week. So they were like laser focused. Very interesting. And of course, a lot of people just build crap, but it didn't matter, right? We're here to learn. So very interesting. It became a success. So our next experiment is going to be now in February, I think. It's going to be the whole company, not only technology, but all about 1,200 people. Even the receptionists and the lawyers and the sales and the management and everybody gets to be involved and just do whatever you want for a week. What's going to happen? I don't know. But this is a week. It's an experiment, and we'll find out. I'll blog about it and stuff. So this is an example of experimental culture. Experiments, local, small experiments, and huge experiments. Right, so I'm getting to the end, don't worry. And spreading and reinforcing the culture. Just get some water. Did I just get shocked? This thing is giving me shocked. Is that a timer alert telling me to finish the presentation? Right. Don't hold the mic with wet hands. Maybe that's it. Right. So how is the culture spread? How is it reinforced? Is it just by accident? I don't think so. I think what helps is this: coaches. Right. One coach for every 2 or 3 squads. It's a dedicated role. So in a sense, the management is investing in culture by having people whose only job is to coach teams. They don't write code, they don't design, they just focus on helping this team improve. Right? And then this people operations, guys, I mentioned before. Right? They focus on things like hiring practices, motivation, social activities, things like that. And there's coaches here too. In fact, one of these guys is me. Coaches that are at this level focusing on synchronizing between these coaches and also working with management and improvement areas that cover more wide than just one squad. But this really helps a lot. But what also helps is storytelling, this culture of storytelling. Like we have a lot of things like this going on. This was an example of when we had a big crash. And this is one of the customer support guys telling the developers his story, what it was like being in the customer support when the system crashed. What happened? What did the customers say? Right? And it was fascinating. These guys were like so interested in that, just to hear the perspective of customer support and how they work. For example, one really cool thing was, at one point they saw something really weird in the metrics, and they didn't know what happened to those users. Why did they suddenly create a whole new account? Did they lose their old account? What happened? I have no idea. No users had filed a bug or anything. So what do you think he did to find out? Yeah, there's hundreds of users. Yeah, he got together the whole customer support department, and they called all the customers. These hundreds of customers just called them. Hello, we're from Spotify. How do you feel about our service? Right? And the customer was like, it's great. Oh, so nothing weird has happened or anything? No, it's fine. Okay. You sure about that? Yeah, except for when I lost all my playlists and had to recreate them. But that was what? And so they learned a lot of interesting things. Anyway, so storytelling, both physical, face-to-face, but also on the blog. A lot of people are telling their stories about what happened. There is a guy he calls himself Chief Architect. And you might imagine this ivory tower guru who designs all the technology, but he's a very interesting guy. He's very quiet. You don't notice who he is. It took me about half a year to find him. He's somewhere here, this mysterious guy. And I finally found him, and I asked him, so what do you do, right? You're the chief architect. And he's like, I mostly go around talking to people. Okay, so do you make decisions? No. Do you drive the architecture? No. I mostly go around talking to people. It turns out sometimes he inspired people to make decisions, but he's pretty much a cultural ambassador, spreading the culture of how we want the system to be. What kind of system do we want? So encouraging autonomy, right? What kind of architecture do we need to get good autonomy? He created an architecture vision, definition of awesome for architecture. But he didn't invent that. How do you think he wrote this document? He went around talking to people. And then he wrote it down. Right? Very inspiring guy. Boot camp. When new guys get together, new people are hired, they get put into a room, and they're like, you guys are a squad. And you get a very specific problem to solve in 1 week. And it's going to be put in production in 1 week, so you better, solve it. And they go. And they get coaches to help them with the process. And it's very difficult, very confusing. But what they learn is how the culture works. They realize that, shit, we're on our own. We're autonomous. Nobody's telling us what to do. There's no specification. They just give us a high-level challenge, right? But then it turns out that if I go ask for help, I get lots of help. So nobody tells you what to do, but if you ask for help, you get lots of help. So that's the kind of stuff they learn by being in the boot camp. But a very powerful experience. I joined the boot camp as a developer just to try it out as an experience, and I was amazed by how powerful it was. Here's the boot camp demo. Social group. This is like a group of volunteers. What they do is they organize events, parties, things like that. So their mission is, we're here to help you get to know each other better and to make sure you have fun while doing it. And they organize parties and games and live bands and guitar lessons and yoga and whatever it is. Right? So these are just some examples of cultural activities that reinforces the culture. Of course, we have a lot of pain too. A lot of pain points. I'm not going to go through it all because it's a long list and it keeps changing, right? The key is that although we have a lot of problems, the problems are normally not long-lived. Because of a culture of continuous improvement, problems are normally solved, the next problem shows up, right? But mostly our problems are related to growth pain, unstable squads. We get new people coming in all the time, so we don't have these nice, stable squads. There's always change happening, right? It's difficult. Scaling breaks stuff all the time. Yesterday's brilliant solution is today's big problem, right? Often. Double in size, everything changes. And cross-time zone collaboration. We now have 50 squads in 4 cities and 3 time zones. Although we try to partition the organization so that squads are local, co-located, well, there's always some dependencies to figure out across the borders. So we're experimenting a lot with traveling and Skype and the little iPad robot thing and all kinds of tools. It's a challenge. Technical debt always tries to creep in here and there, right? Teams get too much in a hurry, quality problems. So yeah, Spotify has problems just like any other company, but what I think is cool about Spotify is the culture of, they don't accept problems, they fix them, really. And the next problem will show up, of course. So it's really hard. I drew the Eiffel Tower because we were in Paris when I did this talk originally. Staying balanced. It's really about, it's not about how are we going to get agile. We're already agile. The question is, how are we going to stay agile as we grow, right? Because if we just grow without creating any structure, we're going to fall into chaos, right? 50 squads, hundreds of developers, all just hacking away, writing code, things like that. It's chaos. But on the other hand, if we try to protect ourselves too much, we create too many rules, we get bureaucracy, and everything slows down. And Spotify becomes like most big companies, where everything is slow and kind of boring, right? Improvement happens slowly. So how do we avoid falling into there? How do we avoid getting into there? Well, that's the challenge we deal with every day, right? So it's a lot of experimentation. But the Agile principles help. Agile practices help us find this balance. And of course, the stable culture. Okay, so wrap up. Yeah, culture matters more than process. Shoe-level Scrum is fine. It can get you out of trouble, it can get you out of a ditch, but it won't make you fly. Right? It gets you only to a certain limit. It's a good starting point. So learn the rules of Scrum or whatever. Learn the rules so that you can break them for a while. You want to break the rules intentionally, not by accident. Healthy culture heals broken process. So hack the culture, right? The process will follow. Important learning. Agile is fragile. I gave you the example, my first example of the police organization. We had this beautiful Agile project, and it got totally screwed afterwards, right? There's nothing, we can't be sure. We might lose this at Spotify in the future. We have to keep focusing on the culture. And so Agile is only sustainable over the long term if all parts of the organization are committed to it. That's a big challenge. And finally, yeah, the culture is you. You are the culture. It's not over there somewhere. So the only way to influence the culture is really to act the way you want other people to act. Model the behavior you want to see. Yeah, that's it. So thanks for coming. I'll be here for anybody who wants to have a chat. I'm not going to do it with everybody here because it gets kind of boring. So thanks for coming, and those who stay around, I'll be happy to talk.
So tomorrow we just stop working for a week, do whatever we want, and start squad right away.
You can blame me.
I just want to have a thank you gift, just a little bit for you and your wife on the way back home.
Wow.
Thank you for coming and give us this inspiring talk.
Thank you very much.
I will carry it all the way to the car, come here and give it to you.
And I'll be carrying it all the way to Colombia and then to Sweden.
Yes.
So I'm just going to hit the restroom and I'll be back here to talk to anybody who wants to chat.
ขอบคุณครับ จบแล้วครับ